Hey there. And this is the video that goes along with the newsletter I just sent on June 26th, 2024. And I am recording the suggestions of movements that I gave my friend who had pain in the bottom of her foot, pretty much at the base of the second and third toe. On the foot where her big toe has bone spurs. So where our big toes meet the long bone of our foot. This is the metatarsal, right? And this is the tarsal. And at this joint here is where you can see I have a bunion, and where a lot of people have different things. Hallux valgus, meaning usually because of a bunion, the big toe is now turning away from the center line towards the pointer toe. Hallux limitus, which means there's a limitation in movement in this big toe, and then what's called hallux rigidus. And hallux rigidus is typically, at this point, you have wear and tear, osteoarthritis in this joint where the toe and the metatarsal come together, and there's pain and there's less capacity for the big toe to move, typically to move in this way, right? For it to extend, or what we call dorsiflex, which is a little confusing, but that's really important for many things. So the big toe, as I wrote in the newsletter, as I wrote in the blog post, which you can find on my website, the big toe is super responsible. It's called the hallux. It's super responsible for helping us balance when standing and when moving through space. It's vital in walking because you're going to lose my face here, because as we push off to swing this back leg forward, it has to bend. It has to propel us forward. The big toe is really, really important for this longitudinal, this inner arch. And the inner arch has a really incredible, important job for shock absorption. Our foot has 26 bones and 33 joints. So tons of ligaments that hold those bones together, and a lot of potential for movement in the foot. So one of the problems, of course, is that we wear shoes most of the time, and we have worn shoes most of the time. Even as infants, we're put into shoes, and we're not a barefoot society. So our feet lose their strength and their mobility, their natural strength and mobility. And oftentimes bunions are produced via shoes that are too tight this way, that push in on the metatarsals, right? And then the bone is rubbed and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed. And what it does is it creates more bone, because that's what happens when bone has force against it, load on it. It creates more bone, which is why we want to strength train, right? So that our bones maintain their density, they maintain their integrity and their density. Okay, so friend went to podiatrist. She was having pain on the underneath side of the second and third toe. This toe doesn't bend very well. She's been very cautious about bending it because there's sensation when she bends it, there's pain. And she was also told that she has bone spurs there. So I met with her, and the thing I was most curious about was the podiatrist had not really talked to her about function, like hadn't really looked at her moving, hadn't really looked at the way the foot moved through space, the way the ankle, the knee, and the hip moved through space. And he did what podiatrists typically do, is he wanted her to stabilize the foot in a boot for a week. He thought maybe she had sprained the ligaments in the underneath side of the foot, that whole metatarsal to second and third toe, and had some other suggestions for her, including a pair of fairly stiff shoes. And this is a person who's barefoot a lot, fairly stiff shoes for at least a month, and no dancing, no real walking, that sort of stuff. So again, I'm not a medical professional. So she should absolutely follow what her podiatrist says for her to do. She should question that podiatrist. They have a conversation. But my lens is always through movement. And if she's not moving this big toe because there's pain, if she's not pushing off this big toe, and I watched her move, then it's highly likely that she is using the other toes to push off of. And these toes are meant for something a little different, right? So we actually, when we step, we roll from the baby toe over to the big toe, and then we push off the big toe. And you can see my big toe is the last thing to come off the floor before I take the next step. So if I'm not able to bend the big toe, what may be happening is I might be, this is going to be a pretty big exaggeration, but I might be pushing off other toes to get that foot forward, or I may be not even lifting the foot off the ground, which is often what happens for people who have hallux limitus or hallux rigidus. So non-movement of the toe, pain in the toe when you're moving, limited motion in the big toe. All right, so I suggested that maybe that was happening. Maybe that movement pattern was happening, and she overworked the toes that are really not meant for propulsion. The big toe is our main propulsive action when we move, when we walk through space, when we dance, when we run, when we do pickleball, we run for a ball. It's going to be the big toe that really pushes off the ground. And so perhaps she was using these toes and overusing them because the body is very smart. And if you're not using something, it's going to either shut it down. You're not going to use it anymore, because why waste the time if you're not using it? That's kind of the way the brain works. Or it's going to find a pathway, a different pathway for you to move. Okay, so there were several things I suggested. So in this next little movement class, you're going to need a ball. You're going to need something to put your foot over if you can't sit and put your foot over your leg easily. Sorry, I was just barefoot in my garage lifting weights. And you're also going to need a resistance band and either a rolled yoga mat or a rolled blanket. Okay, so let's get started. I'm only going to do one foot. That you should do both feet, even if you only have pain in one foot. Work with both feet. So after the exercise that I demonstrate on one foot, pause the video or rewind it and work on the second foot. So using a ball, I'm going to take right at the place where my big toe and instep come together there. I'm going to push down into the ball and roll the ball to my heel and then pull the ball forward. So the pressure is here. I step into it towards my heel and then I relax. So I'm not just rolling like this, right? I'm actually pushing down, taking the ball all the way back to my heel and lightening that up. Yeah. Now, if you feel a lot of discomfort, you're in charge of how much pressure you put into that ball. Yep. So I don't really put pressure in when I take the ball back to the toes. I put pressure here and bring it back. And I put pressure here and I bring it back. Now I'm going to move more in the second and third toe. Now she was having some pretty acute pain underneath the second and third toe. So she would want to be really careful here, right? So that she didn't create more flare up in that region, more inflammation in that region, so much sensation in that region that her brain picked up pain, right? And had a really big pain response to it. So I'm moving from the slip of the toe, the base of the toes, back towards the heel. What I'm doing is working on the flexor tendons on the bottom of my foot. I'm working on the plantar fascia. And I'm also just working on sensation and mobilization of that foot. Because if we're in pain, we tend to hold something pretty tightly. And now I'm going to just do the same thing. So I'm underneath more of the baby toe and fourth toe. I'm going to push into it and slide the ball back towards my heel, relax, push into it, slide it back, move it forward. A little harder on this side of the foot because it tends to try to pop out to the side. Down, push it forward. Down, bring it back, push it forward without pressure, step into it, push it back to the heel. Yep. Okay, good. Stand on that foot for a moment and just feel the aliveness on the bottom of the foot. All right, so now you want to do the second foot. So stop the video, do the second foot. Again, it's from big toe back to heel, pressure on the way back, no pressure on the way forward as you move your foot. All right, you've done both feet now. So if you can sit and cross your foot, and you can even do this on a chair, then do it. And if you can't, if this is uncomfortable for you, then you can put your foot over a block or something like this. But you could also sit in the chair and cross. All right. So big toe. If you've got hallux limitus, hallux rigidus, hallux valgus, or you have bone spurs, something that makes this toe not like to be bent this way, bent towards your shin, then what we want to do is create a little traction. So I'm going to use the same hand as the toe. I'm going to stabilize the foot with the opposite hand. I'm going to gently create traction straight out. So I'm pulling my big toe straight out away from the top of my foot. And then little tiny circles while I'm pulling with my fingers, very small. So these bones are stabilized and I'm pulling, I'm going to use the opposite hand here so you can see. I'm pulling on my big toe and then I'm circling. What I'm not doing is circling the whole foot or the ankle. I'm just circling, having created some space in the joint here, yeah, between the big toe and the metatarsal head. I'm circling with traction. This is a manual exercise, and then I'm going to go the opposite direction. No pain. Yeah, go slow. Try not to move your foot around. Stabilize the foot. Pull on the toe. That's important. And so maybe the circling hurts. So maybe you just pull and relax a little bit. Pull and relax a little bit. We're trying to create a little space in the joint. Yeah, create a little space in the joint. And if I can circle it with that pull, then I'll do that. Okay, great. So stop the video, do your second toe. So again, just as a reminder, I'm going to pull the toe forward off the foot and circle it. Or maybe I just give it a pull and release. All right, welcome back. Third thing that I suggested. Now, I'm going to show this to you in two ways, and you could do this sitting down. I've taken my resistance band, I folded it in half, and I've put it underneath the big toe so that it comes through between the big toe and the pointer toe. Let me move this white mat forward so you have a little more capacity to see this. Yep. So between the big toe and the pointer toe and on the outside of the toe. Yeah. I've got to keep the last four toes down. So what's going to happen is, let me go on this side, is I'm going to try to lift my big toe up off the ground. Right. So essentially it looks like this. I'm able to lift it up. Some of you can't do that. So I have the band. I'm just going to make mine smaller so you can see it. I have the band and I'm going to gently pull up. Now that's dorsiflexion. That's the position that sometimes hurts the big toe. So don't overdo. And then I'm going to slowly press into the band and bring the big toe all the way back down. And then I'm going to try to lift the big toe itself without pulling too much on the band. There's just a little resistance. And then slowly push the big toe into the band. And I'm going to lift the big toe up and then slowly push the big toe into the band. Now what we're working here is we're working the extensor brevis and the extensor longus muscles on the top of the foot. When you pull your big toe up, you may be able to see a tendon right here on the top of your foot. Yeah, that we want to see that tendon. That tendon wants to be nice and big and beefy, and then slowly releasing down. So I'm going to bring the big toe up, and then I'm going to push into the band on the way down. So essentially what's happening is the big toe comes up, and as I push the big toe down into the band, it's like I'm pulling back on the slingshot, right? I'm pushing down and that lets the big toe come up. So I am working with what's called the negative or the eccentric portion of contraction of lifting this big toe up. I'm pushing into the band against load and bringing the big toe up. Now we want to find a number of these we could do to our tolerance. So it could be if you're flared up that you do 5, 3 times a day, maybe. Yeah. It's not really a prescription. It's just a suggestion. And it could be that you can do 25 or 30 of these. Yeah. So keep going. What we're doing is pulling the big toe up. Band is around the big toe. And then we're pushing the big toe in the band back down to the ground. Pulling the big toe up and then pushing it down into the ground. and pulling it up. So what happens when you can't keep the other 4 toes down? You may have to do this. Keep going. Those of you who can do it standing, you may have to do it sitting and actually fold the last 4 toes down. Yeah. The other thing is, and using this foot to show you, is my right big toe has some hallux limitus in it, right? It has, I'm guessing it has some pretty strong osteoarthritis in this toe. And that started showing up 4 or 5 years ago in my late 50s. And, you know, I was a dancer. I've hiked and I've worn shoes that are way too tight for me. For many, many years, I did that. So I'm pulling up on the big toe with the band and then pushing back down. So my big toe is starting to lean towards the pointer toe a little bit. I'm working really hard on that. I wear toe spacers. I wear barefoot shoes. I'm barefoot a lot, and I do these very strong toe exercises, right? But when I'm putting this toe down, I'm really trying to put it down in line with its metatarsal and not over here visiting the pointer toe. All right, that was a lot of those. So you're going to stop the video, go ahead and do your second foot, right? So again, the band is around the foot. I pull up on the band a little bit to help with this dorsiflexion, this extension of the toe. I should see the tendon. I should see the activity here in the top of my foot. I'll also feel my instep become a little active. And then I slowly push the toe down into the band. So I use the band as a resistance to push into. Okay. This next thing is going to be a balance challenge. And if the bottom of your foot is super flared up, or your big toe is super flared up, or you've been told to wear stiff shoes by your podiatrist, then you want to be a little careful with this, with all of these, right? But this is going to require some balance. I'm going to turn the screen up a little bit. Yeah. And I'm just going to use, you could be next to a wall. I'll use the foam roller for balance. But what I want to do is get my foot up on the rolled blanket and splay my toes, right? And then I'm going to put the other foot in front, splay the toes. So my foot sort of broadens and goes around the roundness of the blanket. Now, if I had 2 blankets, it would be really great. So I'm going to step and splay my toes around the blanket. Let me actually do that. Better for demo purposes. A longer. And with my friend, what we had, she had perfect in her backyard. She had these bamboos that had been cut in half, and we were able to use that. It was a very hard structure, and she was able to work on that. Yeah, but for right now, you could use towels rolled or blankets. I'm splaying my toes. I'm not grabbing them, and I'm kind of my foot, because there's a rounded shape here. My foot is kind of going around the blanket. Heel all the way around. So I'm using my intrinsic foot muscles. I'm using the muscles that are in the foot to carefully walk and sort of wrap the foot lateral to medial, so outside to inside, inside to outside, around the rolled blankets. Okay. That's it. So the other thing I suggested was toe spacers for when she was sitting around and reading. We always want to be a little careful with toe spacers and give our feet the chance to get used to them, right? If you're not used to having toe spacers in your toes, don't go kind of batshit crazy and put them in and wear them for 8 hours. You want to start slowly and build up, because they are actually creating a space. They're actually making your toes separate, and we want to adapt to that carefully. So toe spacers, roll the ball on the bottom of the foot with intention, pull on the toe and give it circles, gentle and slow. Use the extensor muscles, so muscles on the top of the foot, to lift the toe and then press the toe back down against the band. You can do that in a variety of ways. Start with a number that's tolerable for you. And if you don't have a lot of pain in the foot, or even if you do, you can try it and see it. Everything needs to be done to your tolerance. Roll 2 blankets, put them end to end, and really work the foot so that from the inside to the outside, from the outside to the inside, is sort of molding around the blanket as you walk step by step. All right.